Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I am excited for this next presentation. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Phyllis Cullen and Cindy Richard, who are the curators and authors of an exhibit that we have on our show this week. It's all about the face, and we're going to talk about it. But first, this message.
Welcome, quilters! We hope you've been enjoying the new online Quilt Fest experience. Why OLQF is free and open to the public, the team at Mancuso Show Management have put countless hours into getting everything just right. To help keep the online Quilt Fest and, when the time is right, our in-person events up and running, we are asking for a suggested admission of just $10. We've placed a link to our suggested admission page right here in the description of this video. You are free to leave more if desired, but we truly appreciate anything you can send. Thank you so much for being here with us, and we hope you are staying safe and healthy while enjoying online Quilt Fest.
So It's All About the Face is based on the book and the Facebook group that is with the same name, and the authors are Phyllis Cullen, who is teaching for us this week, and her colleague Cindy Richard. Quilted portraiture is what this book and exhibit is about, and it's a form of fine art created by contrasting the values of fabric and thread and following the anatomical contours of the facial bones and the structure. It's a great exhibit. I hope you check it out on our website, online, quiltfestival.com, and I hope you enjoyed my talk with the curators. Hi, Phyllis. Hi, Cindy. How are you today?
Great. How are you?
Great, thank you. Cindy, where are you Zooming from today?
Well, I live in Israel, halfway between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. That's where I am today.
That's exciting. How's the weather in Israel right now?
Oh, it's become warm. We're having a heat wave, actually, but we're in the midst of spring, and it's very nice. It's actually 9:30 at night here now.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for joining us, even though it's so late at night. Phyllis, where are you Zooming from?
I'm in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on the big island of Hawaii.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'm sure that the weather is nice there, but just let us know exactly how nice is the weather there.
It's been in the 70s. It's winter, so it's in the 70s. Goes up maybe 5 degrees in the summer. It's pretty nice.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. We're here to talk about the special exhibition that we have showing at our Spring Quilt Festival online right now. It's all about the face. Phyllis, what is the concept behind the exhibit, It's All About the Face?
Well, the exhibit is sort of the culmination of a process. We started with a book, and then we developed a Facebook group that and now has over 2,000 members. And then we had classes and study groups, critique groups. All of them have culminated really in an exhibit of the work of the people in these groups. And it's meant to showcase the beautiful portrait art that's being done in fabric. And it's also to encourage people to think about portraiture, to popularize it, and to realize that portraiture in fabric is a wonderful art form. So there's pieces from all over the world in the exhibit and all sorts of styles. It's really fun.
That's really awesome. So you had mentioned before that you don't see, or maybe it was Cindy that mentioned before, that there isn't a lot out there about direction on quilting faces and quilting portraits. Why do you think that is? Is it a degree of difficulty, or you want to get things perfect? Why do you think there isn't much out there?
Well, I think that I didn't realize there wasn't much out there until Cindy pointed it out and told us we had to write a book because what I'd noticed in 15 years of teaching portrait quilting was that the part that was the most challenging for people was, oh, I've made this beautiful portrait and I don't want to ruin it. And it's true that if you take a face and you put all sorts of unrelated lines across it, or, you know, as you might do with a traditional quilt, that you will distort the features. You will lose the illusion of a face. And we felt that it was important to show that by using contour type lines, or lines that accentuate the features of the face, that, you know, that it was, one, teachable and reproducible, and that everybody would then be able to make portraits that they would be happy with.
Well, that's really cool, and that's really nice that that you and City have, you know, brought something into the world that people can, you know, take note of. We're going to show a couple of quilts now, and the first one is When Live Lives, and that's by Trace Sylvana Thurp Hansen. Can you tell us a little bit about that quilt?
Well, Sylvana is a Danish quilter. She's a very accomplished quilter. She does a very painstaking job of collaging piece by piece of faces that she finds interesting, very often older people with lots of lines and wrinkles, but a lot of emotion showing in the face. And she uses a muted color platform, lets the faces shine for themselves, and they jump off the wall.
It's a great quilt. The next one we have is Brooding Nude, and that is by you, Phyllis. You know, what was the concept behind that?
Well, interestingly, that one is a full figure, and by using a nude, of course, we're demonstrating the musculature and so on, which, by the way, will be in our next book. But Jack Edson also is a very accomplished portrait artist, and hopefully you'll be showing his version of the same thing. And I thought it would be really fun to do the same figure in two different styles, so that people can see the variety in the way that they work, and still show the same strong emotion in a piece.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. You know, you get two artists, you know, with two different point of views, see, you know, and the same quilt kind of showing through two different artists. That's pretty neat. Cindy, the last one we're showing in this section is by you, The Kindred Spirits. Can you tell a little bit about that quilt?
Sure. Well, during this period, my kids moved into our house so that we could help out. And so we've all been in lockdown together, and my grandkids were sitting at the table together, and there was this flower, and I snapped a picture and decided that it would make a great quilt. So that's the story behind it. But they're really good friends, and I just really like watching them interact.
Yes, it is such a great quilt, and that's such a great, you know, memento to have, you know, for future, that you can show them even when they're a little bit older, that I'm sure that they will cherish as well. So Cindy, can you tell us a little bit about what the book contains, and, you know, what the thought process was about creating this exhibition?
Sure. So as Phyllis said before, we started the idea of the book because it became clear to me that there weren't any books out there about how to quilt the faces. You know, people were taught how to put them together, but then not how to finish them. And Phyllis is a doctor by profession, and so following anatomy is second nature. And so we had a long talk about how you really should be following the features and the contours of the bone structure so that the quilting would come out realistic. It doesn't have to do with the colors of the quilt. It has to do with the values of the fabrics and whether you follow the contours of the bones. So then it really does come out and look realistic. So we worked through all these concepts, Zooming together and on long magic jack calls over many time zones, and came up with this concept of the book. And over the whole year that we were all, you know, staying home, we used that time to write a book. It talks about how to what makes a good composition, what what you should look for in a photo. We learned we did a lot of research about lighting and about what makes a good picture so that people could, you know, tell a story. That's really the idea behind these portraits. And once you have this concept in mind, we delved into digital manipulation using Photoshop elements and breaking down the picture into values, and then using fabric values to create the actual image. It's foolproof. I've never seen it fail. It's just a fantastic technique. It's a technique that Phyllis came up with, and that's the focus of the book. And we went through step by step showing how you do it so that people could actually use the book as their guide for making their own portraits. But after the book came out, there was such an interest in our explaining it further. We decided to offer classes, and so we've been offering these classes, that 5-session classes, to explain how the whole process works. People make their quilts through the course of the classes. They learn to make their patterns. They learn about values. They learn about using Photoshop. It's a really comprehensive class. And since then, we've done study groups, and also was born from that the idea of having an exhibit where we would show many of the portraits that students have made through the course of our classes.
That's exciting. So we're showing now a couple of the quilts also from the exhibit that we wanted to highlight. The first is Bewitching Gaze by Lena Mizaros. Can you tell us a little bit about that quilt, Cindy?
Sure. So Lita's partner is a musician, and he also is apparently quite, he likes to play with the fact that her language skills are not French, although they live in France. And so she said she just caught him at a moment where he was just giving her one of those gazes, and she decided she'd make it into a quilt and show his style in the quilt. That's why there's like a scarf coming off the side, and to show his artistic side. And
that's really cool.
I'd like to just mention that Lena is actually one of our students, and this was the first portrait quilt she made, and after the practice one in class. So it just goes to show that people can come up with really nice, realistic portraits by using the technique. And you know, she's a star student.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, it's a great quilt. The second one is The Pensive Figure by Jack Edson. Phyllis, you had mentioned this earlier. How do you feel like this quilt is different from the quilt that you created?
Well, I think the similarities are almost the same, because we both came out with the same the same emotion, the same feeling of a man wrapped up in himself. But Jack uses a technique where he takes traditional quilt blocks, and he uses them as sort of pixels to create a figure. It's also something that I think he's made about 100 quilts this way, and he's developed it as his form. And it's kind of fun to see that you can take a totally different technique and still come out with, yep, that's the same guy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's really funny, and that's a cool way to put it. The last one is the cover of your book. So I understand that the cover of the book, the book itself was published in November. Cindy, how can people purchase this book?
Oh, it's sold on Amazon, and it's also sold on Book Depository. So you just, put "It's All About the Face" in the search bar, and it's there.
Great. Awesome.
Or either of our names.
What's that, Phyllis?
Or either of our names.
Right. the search by Phyllis, Cullen, or Cindy Richard, you should be able to find the book. It's all about the face. Phyllis, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into quilting?
Well, my background, my day job was as a physician, and as a physician, obviously I'm very interested in people. So, my interest in art is also very highly concentrated on people, although I love animals too. But as a sideline, as a physician, there's a lot of stress in your life. And as a sideline, I was an artist. So I did a lot of painting. I used different media. And when I discovered fabric, I thought, well, I can paint with fabric just as well as with paint. And you also have the advantage when you paint with fabric of being able to use prints and textures and all sorts of other things, and quilting lines. So once I did that, so I did not come to it from traditional quilting at all. I just decided that fabric was another good art medium. I'm not very good at traditional quilting, but some of my students come from there, so I've tried to learn a little bit about it.
Well, that's neat. Well, I mean, it's kind of amazing actually that you didn't come from like a traditional quilting background. Did your mother teach you to sew? I mean, did you have any skills of sewing, or did that come, later in life when you started quilting?
Exactly. My mother was a painter.
Okay.
At one point, she bought a sewing machine. I think I was 16. She said, "Phyllis, learn how to use this thing." And I went, okay.
Well, that's nice. At least she introduced a little bit, and then you could kind of pick up, later in life. Cindy, what is your background?
I grew up in New York and moved to Israel about 30 years ago. And when I got here, it was a sort of difficult absorption. And a group of friends one evening came and rescued me. They just pulled me out of the house and they said, "We're taking you out." And I said, "Oh, really? And where are we going?" And they took me to a quilt class. And I had never been to such a class. I didn't sew. My mom sewed everything down to the buttons. And they said, "Bring a little bit of fabric." So I grabbed some fabric that I had. I don't know where I got it even. And I went to this class. It was traditional quilting, but I decided it was great. I was working in high tech, and it was just a creative outlet, even if it was like, sewing squares and triangles together. It was just feeling the texture and the fabric and the color. And it was just like a breath of fresh air for me. I didn't have all that much time, and I had little children. So I started to learn more over the internet. I came up with some really interesting habits. When I did finally take some classes, the teachers would say, "Why do you do it that way?" Because that's all that I could do. I could pick up what I could. But I played with it for a long time until Phyllis showed up here and said, "There's another thing you could do with fabric. You could make faces." So my first class with Phyllis was making my parents. And I was dubious, but I sat there, and all of a sudden my dad was looking back at me from the tabletop, and I said, "Phyllis, look at this, it's my dad." And she said, "Yeah, I told you it works." That was it. I haven't made a traditional quilt since. I only like doing this now, but it really speaks to me, and it's really such an outlet. I do still work in technical writing, and I really like writing, but it isn't so creative. So this is my outlet. This is how I do it.
That's really nice. I think, a lot of our watchers out there are nodding their heads right now. They have found that quilting is such a therapeutic and escape, where you can be creative and you can express yourself, and that's really nice. It's nice to have that kind of creative outlet.
And what, as an art teacher, I like to show people that it's not unreachable. even if you've never drawn before, even if you know that there are tools that you can use, that there's help. You know, we use sewing machines because it's easier than hand sewing. We can use computers to help us make designs because it's easier than 5 years of art school. But everybody can make a portrait.
Right. That's great because, a lot of people will, might say, oh, I could never do that. I could never do that. But here you are, you're saying, yes, you can. And let me show you how. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Phyllis, living in Hawaii, what kind of, influence has Hawaiian culture, had on your artwork?
Well, the Hawaiian culture is very interesting. It's very family oriented. It's very involved with preserving the culture. So I've done a lot of portraits, I think now, of hula dancers and so on. I don't do the traditional, snowflake on a background kind of traditional Hawaiian quilting, but the colors, the beauty of nature, the fact that people are very involved with their families and their ancestors and the whole the magic of their gods and their legends, I think has led me to incorporate some of that in my portraits. But that's not to say that that my other influences are probably just as strong. Highlighting people that I admire, social justice types of quilts, and certainly family. I think we all want to preserve family, and for my students, that's really an important thing. So there's some Hawaiian influence, but it's part and parcel of my background now. I really love to honor the special people that I really admire. Elie Wiesel, for example, is one of my mentors. He was a survivor of the Holocaust who then wrote a lot of books about it and started a movement to address Holocausts around the world, genocide around the world. One of his famous quotes, for example, is, never be silent. Silent helps the oppressor, never the oppressed, encouraging people to speak up about injustice. Another influence might be my background as a physician. I did a lot of volunteer work around the world, and therefore my self-portrait called Looking In actually shows pictures of the people that I helped during my time doing volunteer medical work. Third influence might be living in Hawaii, where I like to show pictures of the colorful of the colorful surroundings, the hula dancers, the culture that's prevalent here.
That's really great. That's awesome. And Cindy, the same question. What are the influences for your quilting?
Well, I've lived in Israel for a long time, and I think of it as quite an exotic, unique place. There are so many influences here that I really don't need to look much further for things to use as subjects of my work. We've got mountains in the north, we've got the Dead Sea, we've got Jerusalem. I mean, there's unique looking people, there's marketplaces, just colors and scents and everything you can imagine. So really that's what touches me, not to mention family members and the people and places around me. So really that's it.
That's beautiful. That's all you need to make beautiful art and beautiful portraiture. Phyllis, what do you think the importance of keeping quilting in the world today, in your opinion?
Well, I think quilting is an amazingly inclusive art form. A lot of people have come to it from learning to sew at their mother's knees. Other people are discovering it as an art form. People are realizing that you don't have to have a paintbrush in your hands to to make art. And as far as portrait art goes, you know, people come to class and say, I want to make a picture of my granddaughter. I want to make a picture of my great grandparents. I want to, and they're comfortable with fabric. Fabric is a medium that brings warmth to anything. And by using techniques that we show, people can make art without an art background. They can, you know, they can incorporate their sewing skills. And I think that I see a great future for quilted art, and you know, as well as continuing the traditions of the past.
I completely agree with you. Cindy, what would you say is the most needed quilt tool?
Well, that's a really hard question. But I think using digital manipulation has really changed. It's a game changer because it really does let you look inside that picture and see things that you may not notice otherwise. I mean, if you have a trained eye, you may get there, but I would say using a program like Elements that allows you to see value, that allows you to play with the different lights and darks and depth and volume. It's wonderful. I would say that's it.
That's amazing. And to think, you know, in today's world that, you know, that kind of technology could actually help or, you know, kind of build on such a, you know, build on quilting. I want to thank you both so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to speak to you both, and I'm excited to see the exhibit in full.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thank you so much, Phyllis, and thank you so much, Cindy, for sitting down and talking to me about this awesome exhibit. Everybody out there, if you want to see it, just go onto our website, www.onlinequiltfestival.com. It's called It's All About the Face. Be sure to join us at 7 p.m. this evening for our Visuals for Competition Winners ceremony. It's going to be exciting. And Eric, our colleague, is going to be hosting, and he's such a cool guy, so I know you're going to love it. And I will see you there. Thank you so much.